My name is Ruth Miller, and for most of my life, I was waiting. Not for a bus, not for a letter, not even for someone to come back through the door. I was waiting for an apology. It sounds small when you say it out loud. Just a word. Two, maybe. I'm sorry. But when you don't get them, when years pass and they never come, those words can grow into something heavy enough to shape an entire life. I am 83 years old now. I live in a small apartment on the edge of a quiet town in Pennsylvania, where the mornings are slow and the nights are even slower. From my window, I can see a narrow street lined with maple trees, their branches bare in winter, their leaves blazing red in the fall. I've watched them change for decades. I suppose I've changed with them. Every morning, I make myself a cup of tea and sit by that window. It's a habit I picked up after my husband died, something to give shape to the quiet. I wrap my hands around the warm mug and look outside, and almost without meaning to, my thoughts drift back to the same place they always do. To my sister. Her name was Alina. We grew up in a little house not far from here, the kind with creaky stairs and a porch that sagged just a bit in the middle. We shared a room our whole childhood, two narrow beds pushed against opposite walls, with a small window between them that let in the morning light. At night, we'd whisper to each other in the dark, talking about our dreams, our fears, the lives we imagined for ourselves when we were finally grown. We were close, closer than most sisters I knew. Alina was older by 3 years, taller, louder, braver. She was the one who spoke up when I was too shy, the one who walked me to school when the neighborhood boys scared me, the one who promised, hand over heart, that she would always look out for me. And for a long time she did. But promises made by children don't always survive the lives they grow into. Our parents worked hard and worried harder. Money was always tight. There were arguments late at night, voices hushed but tense, the sound of our father pacing the floor while our mother tried to calm him down. Alina and I would lie in our beds, listening, pretending we were asleep, holding onto each other's hands in the dark, like it might keep the world from breaking apart. When I was 15, our mother got sick, really sick, the kind of sick that doesn't go away. For months, she grew weaker, and the house grew quieter. Alina helped with the cooking. I helped with the cleaning. Our father seemed to shrink into himself, his shoulders heavy, his eyes tired in a way I'd never seen before. The day our mother died, something changed between us. Not all at once, not in a way you could point to and say, there. That's when it broke. But it did break. Alina was 17 then, almost grown, angry at the world, angry at God, angry at anyone who looked like they might still have something to hope for. I was just a scared girl who wanted things to go back to the way they had been. we grieved differently. And in that difference, a distance began to grow. At first, it was small. A sharp word here, a slammed door there. Then it became silence at the dinner table. Long looks that said more than words ever could. And finally, the fight. I can still see it, as clearly as if it happened yesterday. We were in the kitchen. The radio was playing softly in the background, some cheerful song that didn't belong in a house like ours anymore. I had borrowed one of her sweaters without asking, something I'd done 100 times before, back when nothing felt so fragile. She came in, saw me wearing it, and something in her just snapped. "You always take my things," she said, her voice sharp. "Always." I laughed, trying to keep it light. "It's just a sweater, Ellie. I'll give it back." She stepped closer, her face tight with anger. "You don't get it, Ruth. You never get anything. You just drift through like nothing ever touches you." That hurt more than I expected. "That's not fair," I said. "I'm hurting too." She scoffed. "You don't even know what hurting is." I don't remember exactly what I said after that. I just remember my voice rising, my heart pounding, tears burning behind my eyes. I told her she didn't have the right to talk to me like that she wasn't the only one who'd lost something. And then she said the words that changed everything. "Maybe if Mom hadn't spent so much time worrying about you, she wouldn't have gotten so sick." The room went silent. The radio kept playing, cheerful and wrong. I stared at her, not understanding at first, then understanding all at once. "That's not true," I whispered. She didn't take it back. She didn't apologize. She just stood there, arms crossed, jaw set, as if daring me to say something else. I ran to my room and slammed the door, my whole body shaking. I cried into my pillow until my chest hurt and my eyes burned. I waited for her to come after me, to knock, to say she didn't mean it, to tell me she was sorry. She never did. 2 weeks later, she packed a suitcase and left to stay with an aunt in Ohio. She said she needed space. She said she couldn't breathe in that house anymore. Our father let her go, too tired to argue. I stood in the doorway and watched her leave, my heart pounding, my mouth full of words I didn't know how to say. She didn't look back, and so, without realizing it, I began the longest wait of my life. After Alina left, the house felt hollow. Not just quiet, but hollow, like something essential had been pulled out and nothing had filled the space it left behind. Our father tried in his own stiff way. He made dinner, asked about school, sat at the table with us in the evenings. But he had lost his wife and one of his daughters in the same season, and I could see the weight of it in the way his shoulders drooped and his eyes avoided mine when the silence grew too loud. I kept expecting Alina to come back. At first, I thought it would be days. Then weeks. I imagined her knocking on the door, her face soft again, saying she'd said things she didn't mean. I imagined us sitting on our beds, the window between them, whispering like we used to, promising never to let something so small come between us again. But days became weeks, weeks became months, and the door never opened. She wrote once, a short letter from Ohio, just a few lines. She said she was fine, that she had found a job, that she hoped we were doing all right. There was no mention of the fight, no apology, no hint that she planned to come back. Our father wrote her back. I didn't. I folded her letter and kept it in a drawer, reading it over and over, looking for something that wasn't there. I told myself she just needed time. Time has a way of stretching when you're waiting. I finished school. I helped my father at home. I learned how to cook meals that didn't come out burned or bland. I learned how to keep the house running, how to pay bills, how to pretend I was stronger than I felt. And all the while, in the back of my mind, I kept a small, steady hope alive. One day she'll call. One day she'll say she's sorry. One day this will all make sense again. But that day didn't come. Years passed. I got a job at the library in town, a quiet place that suited me. I liked the smell of old books, the calm of the reading room, the way stories could carry you somewhere else when you needed to escape. I told people I loved my work, and I did. But part of me also liked that it kept me surrounded by words that weren't my own, stories where apologies came and wounds were healed, even when mine weren't. Our father grew older, slower. His hands shook when he held his coffee cup. His steps grew careful on the stairs. We didn't talk much about Alina. Sometimes I'd catch him looking at the empty chair across from him at the table, and I'd know he was thinking of her. Once, when he was feeling particularly tired, he said, almost to himself, "I wish she'd come home." I nodded, because there was nothing else I could do. He died when I was 27. Another funeral, another grave, another goodbye that didn't feel finished. After that, it was just me. I moved into a small apartment, kept my job at the library, built a life that looked steady from the outside. I made friends. I joined a church. I baked casseroles for potlucks and smiled when people asked about my family. It's just me now, I'd say. And that was true. But even then, I didn't say it all. There was always that unspoken part of me that still belonged to a sister who hadn't been there for years. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, I'd take out Alina's old letter and read it again. The paper yellowed with time, the folds worn soft. I'd imagine what she looked like now, if she'd cut her hair, if she still laughed the same way, if she ever thought of me when winter came, or when she saw something that reminded her of home. I wondered if she ever thought about the words she'd said in that kitchen. I wondered if she ever regretted them. I married when I was 32. His name was Thomas. He was kind and steady, with a gentle voice that made you feel safe just listening to it. He didn't come from a big family either, and maybe that's part of why we found each other. We built a good life together. Simple, honest, not full of grand adventures, but full of small, quiet joys. Sunday mornings with pancakes. Evenings on the couch listening to the radio. Walks through the park when the weather was good. Thomas knew about a leaner, about the fight, about the silence that followed. He used to say, "Maybe one day she'll come around." And I would nod, even though, as the years went on, that hope began to feel more like a habit than a belief. We never had children. It just never happened. We talked about it, wondered about it, then slowly learned to live with the life we had instead of the one we'd imagined. Sometimes I thought about Alina's children, if she had any. I pictured nieces or nephews I might never meet, faces I'd never know. Another part of my life that existed only in my imagination. Thomas died when I was 60. A sudden illness, too fast, too unfair. After that, the waiting changed shape. For years, I had been waiting for Alina's apology. After Thomas was gone, I found myself waiting for something else too. For the ache to ease, for the house to feel less empty, for the nights to pass without that heavy loneliness pressing in on my chest. But through it all, that old weight remained, quiet, persistent. I told myself I wasn't angry anymore, and that was mostly true. The sharp edge of it had worn down over time, smoothed by years of living. But beneath that, there was still a question that never quite went away. Why didn't she ever say she was sorry? And more than that, why was I still waiting to hear it? By the time I turned 80, most of my life felt settled into place. Not exciting, not new, just settled. The days had a rhythm to them that rarely changed. Wake up, make tea, sit by the window, walk to the corner store if the weather was good, read in the afternoon, watch a little television at night, go to bed early, repeat. There was comfort in that routine. When you've lost enough, predictability starts to feel like a gift. But even in that calm, there were moments when the past would rise up without warning. Sometimes it was a song on the radio, one Alina used to hum while brushing her hair in front of the mirror. Sometimes it was the smell of clean laundry, reminding me of the way we used to hang clothes on the line in the backyard, racing to see who could finish first. Sometimes it was just the sound of laughter drifting up from the street, and I'd remember the way she used to laugh, loud and fearless, filling every room she walked into. On those days, I'd sit very still, my hands folded in my lap, and let the memories come. I didn't fight them anymore. Fighting had never helped. I'd learned that memories, like grief, don't go away when you push them down. They wait. They always wait. I used to think that if Alina ever did apologize, everything would finally settle, that the ache I'd carried for so long would dissolve, and I'd feel whole again. But as the years passed, I began to wonder if that was really true. If I had built her apology into something too big, too powerful, as if two words could somehow rewrite a lifetime. And still I waited. Then one afternoon, something small happened. I was at the library, the same one I had worked in for most of my adult life, even though now I was just a visitor. I liked to go there once a week, sit by the window, and read the local paper. It made me feel connected, like I still had a place in the flow of the town. That day, I was flipping through the announcements section when a familiar last name caught my eye. Miller. It was under the list of recent deaths. For a moment, I didn't think much of it. Miller is a common name. But then I saw the first name, Alina. My breath caught in my throat. I read the line again, slowly, afraid my eyes were playing tricks on me. Alina Miller, age 86, formerly of Ohio, passed away peacefully, survived by 2 sons and 4 grandchildren. A small notice, just a few lines. No photograph, no life story, just the bare facts of a life ending. My sister. I sat there staring at that tiny announcement while the world went on around me. Pages turning, chairs scraping, a quiet cough somewhere behind me. It felt unreal, like I had stepped outside of time for a moment while everything else kept moving. She was gone, and with her went the apology I had been waiting for my whole life. I walked home slowly that day, my steps heavy, my thoughts tangled. The sky was gray, low clouds hanging over the town, matching the weight in my chest. I kept thinking, maybe it isn't real. Maybe there's another Alina Miller out there. But deep down, I knew. I could feel it in that place inside me that had always been tied to her. At home, I sat at my kitchen table and cried. Not loud sobs, just quiet tears that slid down my cheeks and dripped onto my hands. I cried for the little girl who used to whisper with me in the dark. I cried for the angry young woman who had said words she couldn't take back. I cried for the decades we had lost. And I cried for myself, for all the years I had spent waiting for something that would now never come. When the tears finally slowed, I sat there in the silence and asked myself a question I had never dared to ask before. What if the apology never comes? What if it never was meant to? What if I've been letting that weight hold me in place all these years? The thought scared me, because waiting had become part of who I was. Letting go of it felt like stepping into a world I didn't know how to live in anymore. But another thought followed close behind. What if I don't need it? What if the only one who can free me from this is me? That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint sounds of the building settling around me. And sometime in the early hours of the morning, as the darkness began to soften just a little, I made a decision. Not a loud one, not a dramatic one, just a quiet promise to myself. I would stop waiting. The next morning, I woke before my alarm, the gray light of early day creeping through the curtains. For a moment, I lay still, listening to my own breathing, feeling the weight of the night's decisions settle inside me. I half expected to feel different right away, lighter, maybe, or braver. But I didn't. I felt the same as always, tired, quiet, human. And yet, something had changed. I got up, made my tea, and sat by the window as I had done for years. The street was just beginning to stir. A car passed. A woman walked her dog. The maple branches swayed gently in the morning breeze. It was all so ordinary. And somehow, that made what I was about to do feel even more real. I took a piece of paper from the drawer and set it on the table in front of me. I hadn't written a letter in years. My hands felt stiff as I picked up the pen, and for a moment, I just stared at the blank page, not sure where to begin. Then, without thinking too hard, I wrote her name at the top. Dear Alina. The words came slowly at first, then faster, as if they had been waiting for this chance. I wrote about our childhood, about the little room with the 2 beds and the window between them, about how safe I used to feel when she held my hand in the dark. I wrote about the kitchen, the sweater, the fight that had changed everything. I wrote about how much her words had hurt and how long I had carried them with me. I didn't try to make it pretty. I didn't try to soften it. I just told the truth. Then I wrote about the waiting, how I had waited for her to come back, waited for a letter, waited for a phone call, waited for her to say she was sorry. How that waiting had followed me through school, through marriage, through widowhood, through decades of quiet days and quieter nights. And finally, I wrote what I had never imagined I would. I forgive you, not because what you said didn't matter, not because it didn't hurt, but because I don't want to carry it anymore. I told her I hoped she had found peace in her life, that I hoped she had known love, that I hoped, in some way, she had thought of me too. When I finished, my hand ached and my eyes were wet. I read the letter once, then folded it carefully. There was nowhere to send it, no address to write, no mailbox that could carry it where it needed to go. So I did the only thing I could. I took the letter to the small park down the street, where a few bare trees stood over a quiet patch of grass. I sat on a bench and held the paper in my hands, feeling its weight, feeling the years inside it. Then I tore it into small pieces and let them fall into the trash. It wasn't dramatic. No wind, no music, no sudden feeling of release. just a quiet moment and a small act. But as I walked home, I realized something was different. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I wasn't waiting. I wasn't listening for a phone that would never ring. I wasn't watching the door for someone who would never walk through it. I wasn't carrying that question of why and when and what if in every corner of my heart. I was just there, living the day in front of me. The weeks that followed didn't turn me into a new person. I still woke up early, still made my tea, still sat by the window. But the thoughts that came with those habits began to change. When I thought of Alina, it wasn't only with hurt anymore. I could remember her laugh without feeling that sharp twist in my chest. I could picture us as girls again and feel warmth instead of anger. Some days were harder than others. Letting go isn't a straight line. It loops back on itself. It tests you. But each time I felt myself slipping into that old habit of waiting, I reminded myself of the promise I had made. She is gone. The apology is gone. But I am still here. And what I do with that is up to me. One afternoon, not long after, I went through an old box in my closet and found a photograph I hadn't looked at in years. Alina and me sitting on the porch steps, arms around each other, smiling at the camera like nothing in the world could ever come between us. I sat with that photo in my lap for a long time. I loved you, I said softly to the empty room. I still do. And for the first time, saying it didn't hurt. I'm 83 now. My days are quiet. My world is small. But inside, I feel something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Free, not because the past changed, not because I finally heard the words I wanted, but because I stopped giving my peace to a moment that would never come. The day I stopped waiting for an apology was the day I finally began to live the rest of my life. And I only wish I had done it sooner.